Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. So today we are on our day 7 of upskilling our performance testing and our performance engineering skills, and we are seeing about the first few steps or first few activities of setting up the environment for the testing. And as part of it, today we are going to see about the configuring of our test environment. So before we move on to the video, this is me, Yavasan Shanmugam. I welcome you all to our Little Sly YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. Like and share the video with your friends who are looking for upskilling their performance testing and engineering skills. And in case if you want to have any trainings or any one-to-one sessions, please do comment in my or email to my email ID at wasantc@gmail.com. And now we'll move on to the part one of this video. So, but before that, let me give you a quick introduction on this particular video, which is the configuring of test environment. So, one of the key responsibilities of the performance tester or the engineer is to ensure that the testing environment is properly set up before conducting the performance test. And this configuring of test environment involves three different steps. One is the setting up the test environment, and then the tools, and then the resources. So when it comes to the testing environment, this refers to the setting up of the performance where the performance tests will be conducted. So this includes the setting up of the testing environment includes the hardware, the software, the network configurations, and any other components which are required to emulate the production environment as closely as possible. And the environment again should be very stable and representative of the real world conditions where the application will be deployed. And when it comes to the tools, performance testing requires specialized tools to simulate the user behavior and to generate load, because that's the main priority. We have to generate more and more of the load to understand for any performance bottlenecks. And also we have to set up tools to monitor the system performance. And after doing all these, after simulating the user behavior with a huge load and by monitoring the system performance, we have to analyze the results. And these tools could include load testing tools like JMeter or Gatling, LoadRun or NeoLoad, whatever tool you are using, and monitoring tools like New Relic or App Dynamics or Datadog or Splunk or Dynatrace or any tools, and analytics tools for the result interpretation. So ensuring that these tools are properly installed, configured, and integrated, it's very essential for conducting the meaningful test. And after configuring the test environment and the tools, the third part is the resources. So this resources encompasses human resources, which is us. So such as the test engineers or the developers, as well as any other resources who are required for testing, such as test data, test scripts, documentation. And it's important to have skilled personnel available to design, execute, and analyze the test effectively. So as I have underlining the word skilled, we have to skill ourselves to make sure that we do proper test designing, to do the execution, and finally the analysis, right? So whatever tests we run or we execute, we do monitoring, it's always very important to analyze the tests effectively. And on top of it, having access to relevant test data and script ensures that tests can be conducted efficiently and accurately. So now moving on to the part one. So before we start testing how well our system performs, we need to get everything ready. So everything which I means is the so far topics which I have discussed, which I have told you, the tools, the hardware, the software, and the network configurations and any other components. So all these components has to be ready, and this includes setting up the testing environment, which I have told you just now. And this is to make sure that we have the right tools, which includes your performance testing tools, your monitoring tools, and gathering all the resources we all need. So when it comes to gathering all resources, we all know, starting from the test plan, the strategy document, the test design, the test data, everything which we require for the testing. And doing this before the features we want to test or even available helps us do more testing in less time once they are ready. So it's like getting all your ingredients and utensils ready before you start cooking. So it makes the cooking process smoother and easier and faster. So that's what I'm telling you again. So doing all these, doing that is collecting the tools, gathering all resources before the test, before we want to test, or even available help us to do more testing in less time once they're ready. Because once we have everything ready in our hands, we can do everything really quick and efficient. And now moving on to the part two, getting load generation and application monitoring tools ready for testing is not always straightforward. Yes, I am again reiterating because getting the load generation and application monitoring tools is not always straightforward because there can be issues like setting up specific network setups. You'll have to uh, whitelist your machines. You'll have to add the firewalls, and you have to get the right hardware or making sure different software versions work together smoothly. So you have to fix all these. So it doesn't mean that you're going to get everything straightforward. So you have to set up everything, like I said, like before you start your test and keep it ready. And it's common to face unexpected problems along the way, and that's for sure, because most of us, I mean, like every one of us would have faced that issue. Like we will face unexpected problems. It's not expected, because if you're facing some issues, the next time if we expect the same thing, it will never happen. We always get some unexpected issues, and that's why it's important to start early, so we have time to solve any issues before we begin testing. And it's like doing a practice run before the real thing to make sure everything works smoothly. So just remember, we I always wish I do not I wish everyone to not get any unexpected problems, but there are chances where we might get that. So that's why it's very important to start early, so you don't wait until you get your scripts. Just prepare all these, setting up the tools, the test environments, everything before you get your scripts, before you're ready to start your script. So make sure that you have everything ready, so that you will you do not actually want to wait until the last time. And it's like doing a practice run before the real thing to make sure everything works smoothly. Yeah. So now moving on to the part three, it's important to regularly adjust and improve your load generation setup and tools during the project. Because even if the application you are testing doesn't change and your load generation tool is fine, the things you want to measure might change over time. So this often means you will need to update, or you have to add monitoring tools to keep track of the right information. Because in most of the scenarios, at the very first time when you run a test, you will find like everything looks fine, your response times are very less, your throughput are in sync, and your hits and throughputs, like everything goes fine. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to be fine. You have to keep on regularly adjust, and you have to keep on improving your load generation setup. You have to increase the number of load, I would say, when it comes to load generation setup. And when it comes to the tools, you have to keep on adding tools like your monitoring tool, so that you can understand how well does a db query takes time, and how long a queue length takes time for it to get uh, executed. So you have to make all these changes regularly. You must not have the same setup, and I don't think you will have the same setup, because by the uh, by the time you face any issues, you will automatically start adding things. So you'll start adding components. But in most of the scenarios, people might be lethargic in adding those things. But I would recommend you to keep on improving your setup, your load generation setup, and your tool setup. And it's like making small adjustments to your recipe as you cook, to make sure the dish turns out just right. So you have to keep on improving, you have to keep on adding the components. And this often means, again, you have to update, or you have to add monitoring tools to keep track of the right information. And in fact, it does not only stop with this. In fact, this updation will also have to be part of your test plan, your test strategy, because you have to scale the number of users. Once your application is growing bigger and bigger, you have to do a kind of a volume testing, or you have to increase your load, so you can do a better load testing. And you have to even increase the number of tests, and the you have to add the strategies as well. You have to add objectives to it. For example, you have to do a soak test to see if there are any memory leaks that's coming in, or you have to see whether the garbage collection is done properly. And you can even add profiler tools to understand how well does each and every method takes, and like how much time does it takes. So that's what I'm saying again. Like you have to regularly adjust and improve your load generation setup and tools. And then the last part, so the first part of this particular section is the first part, which is the load capacity. So you have to figure out how much load your system can handle before it starts slowing down. So usually the first thing to get overloaded are memory and then the processor. So you have to figure out how much load your system can handle before it starts slowing down. So that's the first part, which is the load capacity, and you have to configure a test environment based on that. And then the system clocks. So you have to make sure all the clocks on the machine you are using are set to the same time, because this will help you to get your data accurately and saves time by avoiding having to redo tests due to unsynchronized clocks. So this might look a simple thing, but it's always a powerful one, because you have to collect your data accurately in a manner that it has to be like synchronous with the other areas as well, the firewalls, the monitoring tool. So it might look simple, but it's very important. So make sure that you are keeping all the clocks on the machines you're using are set to be the same time. And coming back to the third one, which is the hardware validation. So you have to double check that your load tests are accurately simulating real world hardware components like switches or network cards. And you have to ensure they are operating in the right mode and they are accurately emulating the user actions. So this is again very important, because every test that we do is actually simulating the real world components. So it does not include only the script or only the transactions. It also involves components like your switches and network cards, because they are again part of your production environment as well. So you have to ensure that you're operating in the right mode and you're accurately emulating the user actions. And coming back to the server cluster, so if your system uses server clusters in a load balanced setup, you have to make sure your load test distribute the load evenly across servers. This is again part of your load balancing, because you can use techniques to avoid all clients hitting the same server, such as simulating different IP addresses for load generators. So this is again another critical point, because if your system uses the we know, like we all know that every system is nowadays is using load balancing setup, even if it is an on-prem setup or even if it is in a cloud setup. Every machines or every application is now using, it can be a web application, it can be a mobile application, it can be any sort of applications in the current world. They are using the load balancing, right? So we have to use the techniques to avoid all clients hitting the same server. We can do any sort of algorithms. We can write anything. We have to set up the load balancing, the load IP setup, and the network, the virtual machine forwarders, or whatever you say in your cloud terms. But we have to simulate different IP addresses again for load generators to make sure that the load is being distributed evenly across servers. And then finally, the resource monitoring. This is very critical, even though I'm telling it as a last point. This resource monitoring is very critical when it comes to your performance testing. So we have to keep an eye on how our servers or how your servers are handling the load during testing. You have to monitor things like CPU usage, the network activity, the memory usage, the disk activity, and the number of transactions happening per unit of time, because this will help you to ensure the load is spread out evenly across all these servers. So with that, I come to an end, and I believe I have shared my knowledge, and it will be definitely beneficial to you when it comes to configuring your test environment. At least in some point of time, you might take one of my point, which is very helpful to you. So with that, I come to an end, and I believe this video would be very useful to you. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and Little Slaw.